Good day. This is the Corrupt True Crime Podcast, and I'm Charlie Cruz. Today's episode is about one of the most meticulously engineered heists in American history. A robbery so precisely planned it operated like clockwork, where 11 men in Halloween masks executed what the FBI would call the crime of the century. We're diving into the 1950 Brinks armored car depot robbery in Boston, Massachusetts, a masterpiece of criminal planning that took 2 years of preparation, involved studying every mechanical detail of the building's security system, and resulted in the theft of over $2 million. This wasn't a smash and grab. This was a symphony of timing, tools, and technical precision that baffled investigators for years. The Brinks job, 17 minutes. That's all it took for 11 men in Halloween masks to walk into the most secure money company in America and walk out with nearly $3 million. The vault was open. The employees were tied up. And by the time anyone could reach a phone, the thieves had vanished into the Boston night with the biggest cash haul in American history. They'd spent 2 years planning every single second. They'd rehearsed their escape routes in the dark. They'd made copies of keys to locks the security company didn't even know could be picked. And here's the thing that makes this story absolutely wild. They almost got away with it. Not almost like they made it a few months. Almost like they were 6 days away from the statute of limitations expiring when the whole thing came crashing down. This is the story of the Brinks job, and it's got everything. Meticulous planning that'd make Danny Ocean jealous. An inside-out knowledge of their target that took months to acquire. A crew of professional thieves who pulled off the impossible. And then, because this is real life and not a heist movie, the slow-motion unraveling of the perfect crime because of the one thing they couldn't plan for human nature. Let's start with the mastermind, Anthony Pino. Everyone called him Fats, which tells you he wasn't winning any marathons, but the guy's brain was something else entirely. Career criminal, sure, but Pino wasn't your smash-and-grab type. He was a thinker, methodical, patient, the kind of guy who could case a joint for months without getting bored. And one day in the late 40s, he's watching Brinks armored trucks rolling through Boston's North End, and an idea starts forming. Why rob banks when you could rob the company that moves money for all the banks? Now here's what made this audacious. Brinks wasn't just any security company. They were the security company. The name itself meant unbreakable protection. They had a reputation built over decades. Robbing Brinks would be like robbing Fort Knox, which is precisely why Pino wanted to do it. The irony appealed to him. Plus, he'd noticed something interesting about their North Terminal building on Prince Street. It handled massive amounts of cash, but it wasn't as fortified as their main vault. There was a vulnerability there if you looked hard enough. So Pino starts recruiting. He needs specialists. He brings in Joseph McGinnis, who can move stolen goods, Stanley Gusciora, his closest associate, and critically, Joseph O'Keefe Specs. They called him because of his glasses, who's got a sharp mind for planning and nerves that don't quit. Eventually, the crew swells to 11 guys, all local Boston criminals, none of them prone to aggression. These are professionals who prefer skill over force. And then begins the most extraordinary surveillance operation you've ever heard of outside a spy novel. They rent rooms across the street from the Brinks building and just watch. For months. Timing employee movements down to the minute. Noting when police patrols pass by. Figuring out when the maximum amount of cash would be sitting in that counting room right after banks close, but before the armored cars make their pickups. But here's where it gets properly brilliant. They don't just watch from outside. They break in. Multiple times, just walk into the building at night when it's empty and familiarize themselves with the layout. They're rehearsing in the actual location like actors on a stage. And systematically, lock by lock, they're defeating the building's security. They'd remove a lock, take it to a locksmith they trust, get a key made, and put the lock back before anyone noticed it had been gone. 5 different locks between the street entrance and the counting room. 5 keys made over months of patient work. They tested escape routes at the exact time they planned to strike, bought identical disguises, navy peacoats, chauffeur caps, and these absurd Halloween masks with exaggerated comic faces. Everything purchased months in advance from different stores so nobody would remember a bulk order. Nothing left to chance. The target date was a Tuesday evening in January, around 7 in the evening, when the vault would be open and employees would be counting the day's haul. 7 of the 11 would go inside. The others would handle lookout duty and getaway driving. So picture this. It's cold, dark, dead of winter in Boston. 7 men in identical disguises approach the Brinks building like they own the place. They're wearing rubber-soled shoes so their footsteps don't echo. They've got canvas bags folded under their coats, and every single one of them has a key that opens the first door. They move through that building in near darkness because they've practiced this route so many times they could do it blind. Up to the second floor, down the corridor, and then they're standing outside the counting room where 5 Brinks employees are sorting through mountains of cash. The door opens. 7 masked men burst in. It's so sudden, so unexpected, that there's barely any resistance. The employees are secured with rope and tape. This isn't personal. It's business. And then for 17 minutes, these guys work like they're loading a delivery truck. Bag after bag of cash, stacks of securities, money orders. They'd expected maybe 1 million. There's nearly 3 million sitting in that room. They're actually leaving money behind because they run out of bags. 7:17 in the evening, they walk back out the way they came, lock every door behind them, disappear into the North End streets where they know every alley and corner. The Brinks employees break free about 10 minutes later and call the police. By the time badges arrive, the thieves are in a garage in Roxbury, transferring the loot to a second vehicle. The execution was genuinely flawless. The FBI descends on the case like it's a matter of national security, because in a way, it is. If Brinks can be robbed, what does that say about security anywhere? They interview over 5,000 people. They investigate every known criminal in the Boston area. They're examining financial records, watching for unusual spending, cultivating informants in the underworld. The investigation becomes one of the Bureau's largest operations, and they find nothing. Almost nothing. The crime scene yielded virtually no physical evidence, no fingerprints, no useful witness descriptions because of those masks, no spent shell casings because no shots were fired. The getaway was so clean there weren't even tire tracks they could use. Meanwhile, the 11 thieves are following the plan's second phase lay low. They divided the cash, roughly 100,000 each, which is over $1 million in today's money. The agreement was simple. Don't spend flashy. Don't talk. Wait out the 6-year statute of limitations and then you're home free. The crime legally disappears. And for years, it's working. These guys are disciplined. Sure, they're spending their money, but carefully. Nothing that screams, I just robbed Brinks. The FBI is investigating the biggest heist in American history and they're hitting wall after wall. But here's the thing about asking 11 people to keep a secret for 6 years. It's asking for human nature to cooperate, and human nature doesn't cooperate. The cracks start with money. Specifically, arguments about whether everyone got their fair share. O'Keefe starts feeling like he's been shortchanged. There are disputes, resentments building. And in the criminal underworld, resentment turns dangerous fast. Someone threatens O'Keefe. And that changes everything, because now he's not just worried about the FBI, he's concerned his former partners might follow through. He's looking at prison time on an unrelated charge anyway, and he's calculating his options. Stay quiet and take his chances, or talk and maybe stay alive. It's January of '56. The statute of limitations expires on the 17th. The FBI has 1 week left to solve this case before it becomes legally untouchable. They need a miracle. They get Joseph O'Keefe. He walks into the FBI office and starts talking. And he doesn't just give them names. He gives them everything. The planning, the surveillance, how they made the keys, who did what during the robbery, where they counted the money afterward. It's a roadmap to the entire conspiracy, handed over by someone who was there for every moment. The arrests happen fast. 8 men taken into custody just days before the deadline. 2 of the original 11 are already dead from natural causes. 1 died before they could arrest him, but the rest are now staring down federal charges with an eyewitness who can put them in that counting room. The trial is fascinating because the defense has a point. O'Keefe is a career criminal trying to save his own skin. Can you really trust his testimony? But here's the problem for the defendants. He knows things, specific things, details about the planning that only someone who was there could know. And when investigators check his story against the physical evidence, they do have scraps of rope, financial records, movement patterns. It all lines up. Guilty. Every single one of them. The judge hands down life sentences, and you can feel the frustration in that courtroom. These men were 6 days away from pulling off the perfect crime. 6 days from the statute of limitations making them legally untouchable. And instead, they're spending the rest of their lives in prison. The money? Almost none of it recovered. Out of 1.2 million in cash, the FBI found about 58,000. The rest had been spent over those 6 years, or it was hidden or destroyed. Some of the gang members allegedly buried their shares rather than risk having it discovered. To this day, nobody knows where all that money ended up. The impact was immediate. Brinks overhauled their security top to bottom. The entire armored car industry upgraded protocols, alarm systems, vault procedures. The embarrassment of being robbed drove massive changes in how cash was protected. Most of the convicted robbers died in prison. The last surviving member passed away in the 90s, and somewhere in Boston, maybe buried in a basement or hidden in a wall that's been demolished and rebuilt, there might still be bags of cash from the biggest heist of its era. Here's what makes this story stick with you. The robbery itself was a masterpiece. 2 years of planning, perfect execution, 17 minutes in and out without firing a shot. If this were a movie, they'd ride off into the sunset as criminal geniuses. But it's not a movie. It's real life, where even the cleverest plan runs headlong into the messiness of human nature. Greed, paranoia, ego. The inability of 11 people to trust each other for 6 years when millions of dollars are on the line. They beat the building's security. They beat the FBI's investigation for years. What they couldn't beat was themselves, the perfect crime undone by imperfect criminals. And there's something almost poetic about that. All the lock-picking skills and surveillance work and rehearsed escape routes in the world don't matter if you can't account for what happens when the money's divided and people start feeling cheated. Anthony Pino wanted to rob the unrobbable. He succeeded. And then he spent the rest of his life in prison because one of his partners got scared and started talking. That's not a heist movie ending. That's a reminder that in the real world, crime doesn't pay, no matter how brilliant the plan. The Brinks job was 17 minutes of perfection and 6 years of slowly falling apart. They almost made it. Almost doesn't count. The thing about brilliant schemes is that they are seldom brilliant enough, and no matter how clever you are, the house almost always wins. Now, if you enjoyed our show, tap that follow button and 5 stars in our ratings. Catch you next time.
Grab news. Thomas.